Now, I'm thrilled to be joined in the studio by our next guest. With me are renowned farming personalities Becca Wilson and Charlotte Ashley. Becca is a fifth-generation farmer from Yorkshire, and Charlotte comes from her family farm in Cumbria. Thank you both for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks for having us.
Anytime. Obviously, not your first time at Lamma Show.
No.
What are you most looking forward to today?
Well, I think we've got a few panels and other discussions, which I know it takes you away from the walking around, but you get to meet loads of people who come onto the stand, and it's quite amazing that people are actually coming to see what we have to say.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, it's nice to catch up with people that you have only got email communication with throughout the year, and then all of a sudden you're faced with them in person, and I like that. I think it's nice to come and meet up with people because we are spread out across the country. And I think that disconnect as well, it just makes you feel a bit better, doesn't it?
That social element's really important.
There's a few suppliers, as Charlotte said, who might not be based in Yorkshire. You only email, you only go on the phone, then you come here, have a coffee with them and catch up. So it's a really great opportunity for that.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we can't ignore the political backdrop. Obviously, we've had the NFU President Tom Bradshaw speaking this morning about the family farm tax. How much do you think this is having a real shadow over this industry right now? And also, farmer confidence. We've got such big kit here today, inevitably it is affecting investment.
I think it's a massive, massive shadow over, I think farmers like ourselves, we're not farming on a massive scale. We're not necessarily estates who are able to look at much, bigger options for succession planning. Albeit it has probably started conversations which maybe we hadn't had before.
Yeah, I think it did start a lot of conversations that maybe needed to be had, and maybe pushed people into planning their estates in a way that they, in an earlier stage, which has probably helped them.
Yeah.
But I think just uncertainty, isn't it, for people? They don't know what's going on, they don't know how it's going to affect them, and it's a bit of a scary time for most people. But actually, there are ways for some people around it, you just have to reach out and try and find that solution first, I think.
I think it's not unfair to say, though, that confidence is so low in farming at the moment, and it's quite hard because we're, online on social media talking about the good, the bad and the ugly of farming at the moment. It is pretty bad, and as you say, you mentioned all the machinery and investments here. Quite simply, some of them will be out of reach for many farmers this year and, for the coming years as well. So I think that's a scary time when we want to do better, we want to be more efficient, we want this technology on our farms, but we simply can't afford it.
And inevitably that comes down to a bit of profitability as well. Obviously the farm tax plays a role, but inevitably getting bigger margins for farmers in the sector.
Yeah, I think if people were paid more proportionately, people would be in a better position to be able to afford tax in general, and none of this would have happened. So it has been a long time coming. I think it's been an undercurrent for a long time that things aren't necessarily on an even keel, and I think it's brought about conversation that needed to be had.
Yeah. I think one thing, and obviously organisations like Farmers Guardian are really trying to get the message across, and I would say, I know it's a farming publication, but get the message across to consumers and the public as well that we do pay taxes in other areas of business. It's this tax which actually does rely on the profit to be able to afford it, and no business should have to sell their shop floor, as it were, to pay a tax. To me, that's not a fair tax.
Over the weekend, obviously Morrison's spoke publicly showing their support for farmers around the inheritance tax route. How much does the responsibility and role of others in the supply chain take within all this debate?
Massively, I think. I don't think there has been enough of a spotlight shone on supermarkets at present, because ultimately they are responsible for the pricing, and yes, they'll drop prices and rise prices and things like that, but yeah, definitely I think that's a conversation that needed to be had.
I think one thing, though, in that we've seen lots of action from farmers, kind of differing levels of disruption, shall we say. I don't think disrupting the public at the supermarket gates is actually the right thing to do. Supermarkets, yes, they have massive profits, but if we can try and get them on side, that is the best thing that we can do, because they have the big voice and they have the power.
I think Morrison's behind the scenes as well have actually been trying to broker meetings with other supermarkets, and they have actually been trying their best. So very misguided, but it just shows the desperation of some farmers and where they're willing to turn to get that outlet, because they feel like they're not being heard, they feel like they're not being listened to, and I think something definitely needs to, they need a focus, definitely, because otherwise it will go off on a tangent to places like blockading Morrison's, which a lot of us maybe who had researched a little bit more knew that was a bad move. I disagree with that in the strongest sense. Any other supermarket, fair enough, I can take that, but Morrison's, I think they have done their utmost to stand by farmers, and I think we should have stood by them better.
Something I want to talk to you both. Obviously, you're both farmers in your own rights. Obviously, Charlotte, you've been documenting your transition to dairy, which I found, can I say, fascinating.
Me too. I don't know anything about dairy.
Every bit of it, so really enjoyed it. So thank you for that. But I really want to pick up on some of the challenges you've had in making that transition, and any regrets, any lessons that you've learned.
I haven't put this on the internet. I had to tip half a tank of milk away before getting on the train. I forgot to press a button. That's it. I forgot to. I'd tubed a cow that was poorly, and I forgot to press a button, and then came out the next morning and went to look at the computer and went, the whole thing's going to have to be tipped away. It is such a steep learning curve. I can't tell you. It is, but it's not. I think with farming, we talk about it and we don't necessarily put enough emphasis on the fact that if you do something wrong, something dies, you lose a lot of money. I mean, that would have been about £2,000 worth of milk, and on the video is very dramatic. It comes spurting out the tank. But it's just one of those lessons.
It is dramatic, though. It's a dramatic situation. I think channels like yours, for farmers and non-farmers, because we've learned things. It is really important to show those realities that farming can look cute and fluffy when you've got lambs or calves. But actually,
in a split second, things can go terribly wrong.
It can. Yeah, we've had a bit of a hard calving. We've been calving a couple of, 37 heifers over Christmas. So Christmas was quite rubbish. Spirits were low. We didn't really do a lot with the children, if I'm perfectly honest. I've been up every night, 5-6 times a night, normally on the phone to you because she doesn't sleep at all.
And we have our best ideas.
I know how you fit all this in.
We don't. It's just lack of sleep.
Do you know what I will say there? The reason we can do this is the people at home. We always try and say, I've got my mum and dad who are picking up things at home. So, we've got lambs off to market, we're lambing.
You've got that support back.
You've got Roy.
Roy is absolutely. I always, in every panel discussion or meeting or anything that I do, I can't thank Roy enough. He allows me the freedom to be able to go off and do things like this. Like, in reality, I should not be here, like, at all. We've got a friend coming in and helping today, but it just is that, it's the weight of responsibility that I think only farmers can understand, really. And I don't mean that in a gatekeeping kind of way, but really, I can ring you and say, I can't get off the farm, I can't reply to this, I've not answered my phone. And it's an understood thing between a farmer and a farmer, because you know the weight of responsibility. But also, I'm about to go on a panel discussion about how we get children into farming and how to be inspirational. And so it's that fine line, isn't it, of showing the realities and the real story, and yet making it attractive enough that you want the industry to carry on.
Getting that balance, which is very hard at the moment, particularly in the current climate.
And it's hard content-wise as well to keep it on an upbeat fashion. Because you could very much go down a rabbit hole in a minute of just posting political posts or just...
So in preparation of that panel, how do we get the next generation involved? I mean, it's a question that comes up time and time again, to try and make this industry attractive to people from a farming background and non-farming background.
And I always answer with things like, don't underestimate the power of social media. And I know if someone says influencer and we go, and we do. We do. I get really cross. You've got to take that with a pinch of salt that someone's calling you an influencer. Look at the fact that you have some element of influence over the youngsters that you're reaching. And when someone will come to me and say, "Oh, my daughter watches your YouTube channel and she's 12," and I'm like, "Do you know what? That is."
But I guess that's your driver, to get, to do the content that you're doing. If you're seeing people engaging in that content, that's just what you want.
Just
and
be
inspiring.
And then that's when you post your lambing pictures and your nice pictures and your, your sunsets and your gambling cows and all the rest of it. That's the bit that's inspiring. But then you do have to obviously keep that balance. Yeah, you do have to keep that balance. It's quite hard work.
On your farm, Becca, what do you see are the challenges coming up in 2025? Obviously, you're a mixed farm.
Yeah, that's right.
But what's some of the challenges? I know you started lambing.
Yes. So I think massively, and this is broad, it's financial viability.
Yeah.
And most farmers are struggling with that at the moment. If you're not, I suspect there's a good diversified income source, or perhaps for some farmers, they don't actually have their finger on the real costs. And learning what our real costs are. We've done some benchmarking things and been involved with some other organisations and I guess focus groups. Sometimes people think they're wishy-washy, but oh my goodness, have they been interesting to learn where we are in relation to other farms. So financial viability is massive, and ultimately it's a phrase that we always talk about, but we're price takers, and we couldn't move however many tons of wheat directly to a consumer. Yes, we might be able to sell some lamb boxes or whatever, but ultimately we're not setting the price for what we're selling, and whilst we do not get paid a price which covers the cost of production, that is my main. It's a massive worry. It gives, I'm sure, most farmers sleepless nights, but I think on some more targeted level things, where obviously we've just seen foot and mouth in Germany, is blue tongue still having an impact on lambing and things like that? We had Schmallenberg last year, which I know some farmers are embarrassed to talk about, but I very much...
disease threats are there.
Exactly. So I think that's going to be a massive... Financial viability underpins everything, but the livestock side, I think disease, we've got avian flu.
Scab.
This is it. I think it's a really scary prospect, and if as farmers we're not doing things right at those base levels, some things we can't do anything about, but we've got to be really, really on it with practices on our farm and making sure they're the best possible.
At the highest level of government, obviously the DEFRA Secretary isn't attending today. We've got the Shadow DEFRA Secretary, Victoria Atkins. But if he was here today, Steve Reed, what would you say?
He's wearing cardboard for me,
What would you say is the top priorities for this government to get this farming sector back on track?
I think an impact assessment of what they're actually doing. I don't know whether...
Something been called for a long time, Charlotte, even from the previous government.
When we met with both our MPs when we went to London lobbying for with the NFU, and that was one of the questions that weirdly I asked your MP was, has there been an impact assessment done? And the answer was no back then, and then it came out in the news a couple of weeks later that there hadn't been one, and that shocks me. That how can they not understand the implications of what they're putting in place? And I think if they did that properly, I don't mean just a wishy-washy version, if they did that properly, they'd realise how many people are actually being affected. And it's just the trust issue, isn't it? Confidence has been lost.
Yeah, yes. And those impact assessments would consult the sector. That's when you get that buy-in from the farmers.
Where has the consultation been? And who are they consulting? That's the problem. Who are the people that are sitting on the boards? Who are the panels that they're talking to?
That say, it'll be fine.
They might have a fruit farmer from Kent and somebody else. Well, where's the dairy farmer? Not necessarily from Cumbria, but where's the dairy farmer? Where's the...
All your fans.
I think we need a real recognition of the importance of domestic food supply.
Yes.
Because again, that underpins the fact that, okay, well, if it's important, we need a fair price. If it's important, then perhaps let's not put land use at risk, for example. So that for me is massive. But I think the list of jobs that they're making themselves just gets bigger every day.
Impact assessment, fairness in the supply chain, focus on domestic production. The government have a real emphasis on public procurement, making sure that our public services, hospitals, prisons have 50% of the food that is homegrown.
It's keeping the public's trust in farming as well, though.
Yeah.
Because how far do we have to go to sort of erode at that trust that they've got in us now to make a difference? And we don't, honestly, people, that's the worry. People don't want to be protesting or annoying. Anything we do at the forefront of your mind is, I don't want to annoy the public, because we do have public belief in farming and they are on our side, and yet anything we do, I think we've got to be careful that we don't ruin that trust with us.
There's not many sectors where you feel like the reputation of your whole sector is on, I guess, and not to sound self-entitled, but people who put themselves out there on social media. We're pushing a reputation of our whole sector, which comes with it a responsibility, but actually, can the government not value us and show that our reputation is positive, we're doing the right things, we're doing what's asked of us? So I think the responsibility falling on people's shoulders who are spokespeople or who go on the news or who sit on committees is massive.
I think tables have turned in that respect, though, that, in years gone by, people were picked from organisations and they were put on the news because they were a good representation, and now anyone can do that. You can put yourself online, and you need to take that responsibility seriously and put the best version of yourself and our industry out there, because whether we like it or not, we are a representation of our industry and we need to take that seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of misinformation, particularly online. Obviously, you document your farming day-to-day life on social media. How do you deal with some of kind of the negative publicity that gets?
Well,
And manage that? And do you just have to kind of remind yourself why you're doing this?
half the time, I think you look at it from behind the scenes and realise that people are probably misinformed. It's not their fault. People will only see what you show them. And if they've been showed the wrong thing, then that's what they'll believe. So we've just got to put our best foot forward. I don't think there's necessarily any point in arguing with these people. I don't think there's any point in combating the misinformation. I think just ignore it. Other people might disagree with me. I think just blanket. I'm not really bothered. All we can do is show our best practices, and showing your truth is all you can do. And the truth will always come out, which is fine.
How about you, Becca?
I would say I'm in two quite, I guess, less controversial sectors. Arable and sheep, it's not ripping away calves from their mother, it's not intensive pigs or poultry.
And actually, you have to come to terms with doing that.
It happens, but how are we
I
conveying
do
it?
that. And I was always the person, I stood online and I said, we're a beef farm. I don't do that. No, I'm a dairy farmer and I do that every day. And yeah,
I think if you can be as transparent as possible throughout the whole process, then it leaves people's imaginations. Well, it gives them less chance to run wild. So I guess
you can
they
show
can't
your
fill in
reasons
the
why.
They can't fill in the dots incorrectly. But I think one thing that actually we've got a problem with at the moment is animosity from within farmers.
That division.
How can farmers drag other farmers down, or people in agriculture drag people in agriculture down? We're all in this together, and in theory, to my mind, we're all facing the same challenges. So a united front, we can all go and stand and protest together, but can we all be nice online?
Yeah.
People struggle with that. So I think
There's that shield, isn't it, behind that people feel like
it's
they
just
can...
psychology, isn't it? Really, though, it's quite a divisive sector, isn't it? But yeah, it's an interesting job to be doing.
So we've got some exciting news with your collaboration. Wilson and Ashley Wilson.
Wilson and Ashley.
So how
This
did
has
that
been
come?
a
I was gonna
conversation.
say, did it cause any conflict in terms of who's going to be the first?
Well, no, it was my the whole thing has been going on for about a year, and it was my idea. I went forward with it. I did everything, and then obviously I literally dragged Rebecca in, who didn't want to.
Willingly.
Here I am. She's very busy. And then during the name change, it was going to be into farming unscripted, into ag unscripted, and I'd come up with all these names. Anyway, I just thought it sounded better.
and we actually
And that was the message. It sounds better like this.
somebody said to us, oh well, alphabetical, Ashley and Wilson, and
Nope.
you were like,
It sounds better
Wilson
Wilson and
first.
Ashley. Ashley and Wilson sounds like a solicitor's.
Well, we got told we sound like an auctioneers, didn't we?
I'll take that.
So tell us about what the podcast is all about. What do you hope to achieve? I know there's going to be a lot of kind of travelling around.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's your kind of main aim of it?
So to begin with, I went on another absolutely wonderful podcast, really, really good, and I was struck on the good sound quality. And I know that sounds ridiculous. I really struggle listening to other podcasts. I'm really deaf. It's probably something I should get seen to. But anyway, I struggle with the differentiation in the sound. So you've got one person in an echoey room, one person in a really in a podcast room, and that difference in sound just really annoys me. So I thought, how can I get a studio on the farm? And then I thought, I'm not going to get people from Birmingham up to Cumbria. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. So I will never get, on my own, people drawn to me because we're in the middle of nowhere. So I thought about a shipping container. I thought about
I saw you said like
I love how
a
these
van,
ideas
a camper van, and realised how much they were. And then I settled on a trailer.
Yep.
So set out going and looking for this trailer. And and it ended up with an absolutely superb show trailer. It's really, really cool. It's cool.
So it's up and ready?
exciting.
It's all decked out?
Oh,
all sorted?
not yet. Everything's
Branding.
in it.
Right.
But
okay.
it's being done. And then, so it's going to be amazing. So we're going to go around. It is not going to be a guest-based podcast. It's going to be more on the journalistic side. So we'll deep dive recent articles, trends, issues in farming, the countryside.
Farmers Guardian's coverage, right?
Yeah, literally.
Of course.
Yeah, exactly that.
Leading the way.
I think one thing as well, which we kind of discussed which would work, is having the trailer means that, for example, if I'm lambing, we can park the trailer at the farm at home and I can literally nip in, record, Charlotte nips down to my house and I'm back into the lambing shed. Vice versa when Charlotte's at her busy time, and then you don't have that lag that you get sometimes with virtual recordings, which they're the way of the world, but we thought, let's really progress this, let's go in kind of...
But we can pitch up on your driveway and say,
It's ideal.
jump on in for the chat.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily, so if we go, say, for instance, to Gareth Wyn-Jones's, only because he stood over behind you and I'm looking at him, if we want to go to Wales, we're going to pitch in at Gareth's house and we're going to get him in the trailer. It's not going to be about Gareth. He's just going to join in on the podcast, and we're still going to discuss the same articles we would, but it's just bringing that another voice in.
So another voice, to that analysis that you're doing.
And it's going to be more
100%.
about the topics at hand, which I think...
I mean, you've got plenty of topics to
Yeah.
cover.
Oh my God.
Well, this was kind of what I would started with my thought process, thinking there's just so much going on and there's so much we should be talking about that we don't. And also, people maybe keep it slightly PC, slightly fluffy, and I'm not saying we're going to start swearing and things because we're not, but we'll maybe talk about things that you wouldn't get on other podcasts, you know, the impact of different things on farming and whether or not it's
Things
the right
that
thing
are
for the industry. Yeah, slightly
yeah.
more controversial things, but like in more of a fact-finding kind of way instead of a judgmental kind of way,
So
which
we
is
can
where I
expect an
want.
honest, open, raw discussion.
Yeah, there's going to be lots of voice notes, isn't there?
Yeah,
That's
we
what
want to hear from
I want people to send. That's,
people on
I've
this.
just got it in my head.
That's really cool.
Send your voice notes, and we'll literally have them played. It's going to be fun.
I might have to mute some.
Yeah.
Leaks them out.
Definitely. In terms of Lamma, you know, there are so many people here. We're expecting around 40,000 visitors over the next 2 days. We talked about profitability and, you know, such expensive kit here. I'm just interested on your own farms. That kind of vision of investment for 2025, is it something that you're kind of holding back on just because there's so much uncertainty?
I think purely just to the investment that we've made
Already done,
over the
of
last
course.
year, we have no money. We are paying back some pretty big borrowings, and yeah, once we've done that, we can look towards investment. But at the minute, having said that, we need, and I mean, it's a necessity. We need slurry storage. Regardless of how much it costs, it's a necessity. So that's something that we need to really look at seriously and price up. But you know, that's the thing about farming. When you look at it from the ground up, everything is a huge investment. You know, all these massive things, they cost so much money, and it is hard. It's finding that balance of, you know, inspiring people and the rest of it. But like, how do you say? I couldn't tell you how much money we spent. Honestly, it's
and that comes
crazy.
with a lot of pressure.
It does. And would you like to encourage people to do that? I don't know.
that makes me think, you know, we were talking about careers and the next generation, you know.
Like, would I do?
How
I've had
could
the
someone
conversation
take
this
on
morning.
that debt?
Exactly. Or is it
huge
just a
amount.
one-off payment? Is it just our burden to have, and then we hand it on to, say, my children or whoever? Is it just our burden that we've done that investment, and then it's okay, and they roll on from there?
But I think that's where the conversation of around, you know, tenancies, council tenant farms, which are such important startup farms for people that want to get into the sector. That's why we cannot be losing those.
No,
and, you know, there's so much going on in terms of kind of council budgets, around kind of council farms being left off, and you know, that's a real concern because it's a way in.
There's so many ways to farm, and I think actually people, particularly not from a farming background, may not be aware of all these different structures that can be in place. I think that's something, as you say, there are opportunities for it, but they're dwindling through no fault of farming or agriculture or the countryside, through decisions at a higher political policy level.
That's the thing, everything comes back to government policy.
But we're so consumed in it. You know, you are for your social media content, I am for my job, but a lot of farmers are actually blissfully just
very
so
unaware.
detached and unaware
And
of
if
it.
you ask any of the younger generation, they genuinely don't know. And the only thing they know about it is what they are consuming on mainstream social media, which is very dangerous, and it's why you've got to have the correct information put out there.
Yeah, it's big tractors and it's big setups, but they had to be paid for somewhere along the line. And actually, the problem that then necessitates is the crazy hours to pay back, you know, the loan or the borrowings, which in itself, I mean, we could do a whole session just talking about that, but there's quite an unhealthy attitude to a work-life balance, and we talk about it. We don't have a life balance, but it's not something to be proud of.
It's not to be encouraged.
Exactly.
It isn't. And you know, I'd read something that said, at what point does hard work mean that you are like manually exerting yourself? And do you look down on someone who sits in an office as not working as hard as you because you are? Sorry, we're podcasting.
Yeah, but with the work-life balance.
But do you look down on someone who sits in an office and think, you don't work as hard as me because you're not manually hurting yourself?
I think
the physical
is
side
that,
of the farming. Yeah,
and it's an interesting conversation, isn't it?
And I think the honest truth is that you do look at people who have a normal kind of work schedule, who earn a guaranteed salary. And I have to say, I think we can only be human to say sometimes there's jealousy for people who have a life which to us seems simple. It's not for them. Our life to them seems idyllic.
Isn't it funny how the grass is always greener?
Yeah.
So if you live in the middle of a city, you work in an office, you'd love the countryside and you aspire to have a house in the country and all the rest of it, and yet us, with acres of land around us, all we want is like a clean house and central heating that you flip on with a switch. Working broadband.
Working broadband is a definite.
No, yes. I don't want any cracks in the walls. None.
Definitely. Obviously, we've talked quite a lot about, you know, some of the challenges that the sector is facing right now, but I really want to end this interview on some positivity, holding on to that, and optimism. So in terms of kind of two things that you are really excited about for 2025, first I'll go to Becca and then I'll go to you, Charlotte. What two things?
She can think faster.
No, I actually think it's hard that takes me a longer time to think of than the things that I'm worried about. Personal level, hopefully what we can achieve, that is just in a sense of achievement way, but ultimately we're diversifying our farm businesses, which is vital. The other thing is, I'm always excited to see, I guess, the fruition of our season's work, whether that's getting through to selling lambs, whether that's getting through to harvest. I'm excited to see where we're at, how you've done that. Work is everything in that season. So fingers crossed for then.
And Charlotte, very quickly, because we only have 30 seconds.
I'm really excited about getting to know the dairy farming calendar a little bit better and getting to grips with that. I really am. And definitely the podcast is going to be absolutely amazing. Yeah. I'm pleased with the name.
Definitely. Thank you so much for joining me today. Enjoy the rest of your show.
Thank you very much.
Take care.